The grammar of this script has been corrected to reflect Native American English usage, and all numerical values have been converted into full text as words to ensure smooth narration. The call came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Just as I was setting my coffee mug down and settling into my worn-out desk chair, the number was unfamiliar, flashing urgently across my phone screen. Something in my gut twisted even before I answered. "Hello? Is this Ida?" the voice on the other end asked. "Have you ever discovered a secret that made you realize you didn't actually know the people you lived with? Drop a comment with your betrayal story below. I am reading every one." "Yes," I replied, my eyes fixed on the sharp, clean lines of my Denver high-rise office. "This is Charles from Liberty National Bank. We are calling regarding your overdue mortgage balance of $1,250,000. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. $1,250,000. I did not own a home. I did not even own a new car. But as the voice recited my social security number with clinical precision, a flash of my sister Mackenzie's latest influencer post hit me. She was posing in front of a sprawling white mansion, a mansion my name had apparently bought. I stayed on the line just long enough to request the digital copies of the mortgage application. My voice did not crack. I did not let the man from Liberty National hear the sound of a world imploding. I just waited. When the email arrived, the file was a heavy, digital weight sitting in my inbox. I opened it, and my screen filled with the architecture of a betrayal so calculated, it left me breathless. There it was. My name, my social security number, my history. But the signature was the real masterpiece. It looked like mine. But it was too perfect, too practiced. My real signature has a slight jitter, a tiny hesitation I have had since I was a child. This one was smooth. It was the handwriting of a parent who had spent decades observing me, knowing exactly how to forge my consent into a legal cage. I sat back in my glass-walled office, the Denver skyline stretching out like a grid of cold logic. I had worked so hard for this view. I had sacrificed holidays, skipped vacations, and lived in a one-bedroom apartment that barely fit my bookshelves just to build this life of absolute transparency. Meanwhile, my sister Mackenzie was at that very moment probably recording a tour of a 12-room mansion bought with the credit score I had guarded like a religious relic. For years, my parents had cultivated this role for me. I was the reliable one, the strong one, the girl who never made a scene and always had the answer. They called it a virtue. But looking at these documents, I realized it was actually a form of long-term conditioning. It was a prison without bars. They had taught me that my value was tied to my utility. As long as I was useful, I was family. The moment I stopped being a resource to be harvested, I was invisible. This is what the experts call learned helplessness. I had been trained to accept the weight of their failures as my own responsibility. I thought I was being a good daughter by picking up Mackenzie's messes. But I was really just building the walls of my own confinement. My dependability was a chain, and they had been holding the other end for 28 years. My parents did not see a daughter when they looked at me. They saw a backup plan. They saw a line of credit that did not talk back. The contrast was nauseating. I thought about my kitchen table, where I carefully tracked every cent of my utilities. Then I looked at the loan terms for the house in the suburbs. $1,250,000. It was a number so large, it felt abstract. Yet it was tethered to my neck like a millstone. They had not just stolen my name. They had stolen my future. They had taken the years of my life I had not even lived yet, and spent them on a house Mackenzie would probably lose interest in within 6 months. Anger did not come in a wave. It came in a steady stream of data. I was not going to cry. Tears are a waste of hydration, and I needed every drop of focus I had. I began a new folder on my desktop, I did not name it family betrayal, or my pain. I named it the audit. Because this was not a tragedy anymore. It was a balance sheet that needed to be zeroed out. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from my mother. Michelle. Don't forget family dinner Sunday. Sweetheart. I am making your favorite pot roast. I looked at the message. Then back at the forged signatures. I did not reply. Not yet. I had exactly 4 days before that dinner. The old Ida would have shown up and asked for an explanation. The new Ida was going to show up and perform a forensic investigation. I looked out at the mountains in the distance. Their peaks sharp and unforgiving. I realized then that sometimes the only way to break an invisible chain is to let the person holding it fall off the cliff. My parents thought I was the net. They were about to find out I was the ground. I pulled up to the gated estate in Denver on Sunday evening. The iron bars of the gate felt more symbolic than ever, a heavy barrier meant to keep the world out and the secrets in. The hedges were perfectly trimmed. A lush green facade for the rot growing behind the front door. It was a monument to a legacy built on stolen foundations. The smell of pot roast hit me the moment I stepped into the foyer. It was a scent that used to mean safety. But now it just felt like grease and cover-ups. Mark and Michelle were already at the table, looking like the picture of parental warmth. My sister Mackenzie was slumped in her chair, her eyes glued to her phone, likely counting the likes on her latest mansion tour video. I sat down and let the small talk wash over me. They talked about the weather, Mark's golf game, and Mackenzie's growing influence. It was a performance. I waited until the first course was cleared. Then, I set my fork down with a deliberate click against the china. The sound was small, but it felt like a gunshot in the sudden silence. I got a call from Liberty National Bank on Wednesday. I said. My voice was as level as a balance sheet. They wanted to talk about a $1,250,000 mortgage. A mortgage with my name and my signature on it. Michelle did not even flinch. She just kept dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. Her movements practiced and calm. Mark took a long sip of his wine before setting the glass down. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway became deafening. Oh. Ida. Don't be so dramatic. My mother finally said, her voice dripping with that familiar, soothing manipulation. It is not a big deal. It is just family helping family. Mackenzie needed a boost for her brand. She could not qualify for that house on her own. And you have that perfect credit score you are always so proud of. We just thought you would be happy to contribute to her success. I watched them. And in that moment, I understood the trap of normalized cruelty. In their minds, they were not criminals. They were not even wrong. They had lived in this cycle for so long that they genuinely believed my success was a family asset they could liquidate at will. It is a psychological mechanism where parents believe that their love for a struggling child justifies the total destruction of the responsible one. To them, my future was just a resource to be harvested for Mackenzie's vanity. They had normalized the idea that I was not a person, but a donor. You stole my identity, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You forged my signature on $1 million legal document. It is just paperwork. Ida, Mackenzie chimed in, finally looking up from her screen. Her face was twisted into a sneer of pure entitlement. You already have your career and that high-rise office. You are not even using your credit right now. You have more than enough. It is not fair for you to be so selfish when I am trying to build something. Selfish, I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air like smoke. Yes, Mark said, his face hardening into the authoritative mask he used to keep me in line. We did what we had to do to protect this family's image. We are not going to sit here and be interrogated by our own daughter. You should be grateful we think you are stable enough to carry the weight. I leaned back in my chair. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just felt the last thread of obligation snap. They were not shocked by what they had done. They were only shocked that I had stopped playing my part. They saw me as a net that would always be there to catch them. They did not realize that I had just turned into the ground. I stood up, leaving the pot roast untouched. Thanks for the clarity, I said quietly. As I walked out, I began mapping the trail of breadcrumbs they had left behind. They thought the conversation was over. They did not realize that the audit had just begun. I returned to my office. The glass walls, reflecting a version of myself I finally recognized. The reliable daughter had been retired. In her place stood a data analyst who specialized in identifying systemic rot. I did not reach for a tissue. I reached for my encrypted hard drive. In my line of work, emotion is just bad data in an audit. It is noise that obscures the signal. And right now, the signal was screaming. I made the call to Mr. Warner on Monday morning. He arrived at my office at exactly 9 o'clock. Smelling of old leather and expensive litigation. He did not offer platitudes about family. He simply opened his leather portfolio and let me talk. I handed him the mortgage documents, the credit reports, and the screenshots of Mackenzie's social media. They committed identity theft? I said, my voice as cold as the glass behind me. But I need to know how deep this rabbit hole goes. I am not just looking for a way out. I am looking for the source. Mr. Warner nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the spreadsheets I had compiled. He was known for being discreet and ruthless. The kind of man you hire when the person across the table thinks they are untouchable. Over the next 72 hours, we did not just look for evidence, we conducted a total financial autopsy. I used the same tools I use for high-stakes corporate audits. I mapped the money trail. I cross-referenced the dates of the mortgage application with the parents' business filings. This was my professional weapon. For years, they had seen my career as that little desk job. They did not understand that my little job had given me the power to see through walls and dismantle their financial shell games. The first discovery came on Tuesday afternoon. My parents had not just used my name for the mortgage. They had opened a secondary business line of credit for Mackenzie's influencer brand, a $150,000 debt that had already defaulted. The signature mismatch was even more glaring here. It was a sloppy, arrogant forgery. The work of people who thought they would never be audited by the girl they considered a family utility. But the real kill shot came when Mr. Warner traced the origin of the $250,000 down payment for the mansion. I had assumed it was Mark and Michelle's savings. I was wrong. The trail led directly to a trust fund left by my grandmother, Eleanor. It was a legacy fund. A small fortune she had set aside specifically for my doctoral studies in environmental policy. She wanted me to have the education she was never allowed to pursue. Mark and Michelle had drained it. Every cent. They had taken my grandmother's last wish and used it to buy a marble foyer for a girl who could not even finish her community college degree. The realization did not break me. It sharpened me. They had not just stolen money. They had stolen my grandmother's voice. They had traded my potential for Mackenzie's vanity. This was the moment I realized that their love was a subscription I was paying for with my life. We have everything we need, Mr. Warner said, closing the folder. Between the forgery on the mortgage and the misappropriation of the trust funds, this is a criminal case. I looked out at the Denver skyline. My career precision was no longer just a skill, it was a weapon. I had spent years being the dependable one, carrying the weight of their secrets. Now, I was going to use that same weight to crush the foundation of their lies. File it, I said. Every report, every dispute, every criminal complaint. I want the trail to be undeniable. I was not doing this to them. I was reclaiming the only thing they had not been able to forge, my truth. And as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I felt a new kind of sunrise, starting within. It was made of facts, numbers, and the cold, quiet promise of justice. The first sign of the counterattack was not a legal summons. It was a phone call from my Aunt Patricia at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. I sat in the dim light of my living room, watching the notification flicker like a warning signal. When I answered, there was no greeting. Only a voice thick with a strange, manufactured pity. "Ida. Honey. We are all so incredibly worried about you," she began, the words dripping with the kind of condescension that makes your skin crawl. "Your mother told us about the breakdown. She said the pressure at your firm has finally pushed you over the edge. Please, sweetheart, you need to stop this talk about police reports and identity theft. It is making you look unstable." I did not argue. I did not try to explain the $1,250,000 mortgage or the forged signatures. I simply listened to the sound of a whisper campaign in its opening act. Michelle was fast. She knew she could not win a fight against the data. So she was attacking the analyst. She was building a narrative where I was the broken, delusional daughter who had hallucinated a massive financial crime because I could not handle the stress of my high-rise life. Within 48 hours, the digital walls of my family's social circle were fortified against me. My cousins stopped responding to my texts. My grandmother's bridge partners sent me links to mental health retreats. It was a masterclass in toxic family dynamics. To the outside world, my parents were the grieving saints, dealing with a wayward child. Behind closed doors, they were the architects of my ruin. Mackenzie played her part perfectly. On Friday afternoon, she posted a video from the garden of the mansion my credit had bought. She looked radiant, holding a glass of expensive champagne while the sun set behind her, protecting my peace from the toxic people who want to pull me down. The caption read, "Success is the best revenge. Blessed. Growth." I watched the likes climb into the thousands. I watched the comments fill with heart emojis and messages of support for her bravery. To them, she was an inspiration. To me, she was a parasite wearing an ivory silk robe. Anger was not a fire this time. It was a cold, clinical observation. I saw the way they were weaponizing the truth of my silence. Because I had spent 28 years being the one who did not make a scene, they assumed I did not have the stomach for a public execution. Then came the emotional blackmail. My father, Mark, called me on Saturday morning. His voice was raspy, calculated to sound fragile. "Ida, my blood pressure has been through the roof since your lawyers contacted us. The doctor is talking about a risk of a stroke. Do you really want your father's life on your hands because of a few signatures? Is this how we raised you? To choose a bank account over your own blood?" It was a classic move from the family playbook. When the smear campaign fails to stop you, they try to make your boundaries feel like a death sentence. They wanted me to believe that my pursuit of justice was an act of violence against them. They wanted me to feel the weight of their health, their reputation, and their happiness, as if it were a debt I was born to pay. I sat at my desk, looking at the manila envelope from the police station. I thought about the $250,000 they had drained from my future. I thought about Grandma Eleanor's trust fund, meant to give me a voice they had spent my entire life trying to mute. "You should talk to your doctor about the stress of committing a felony, Dad," I said, my voice as steady as a heart monitor. "Maybe that would help your blood pressure." The silence on the other end was absolute. For the first time, he did not have a lecture ready. I hung up and added the recording of the call to the audit folder. To them, this was a war of words and reputations. To me, It was a forensic process. I was documenting the smear, the gaslighting, and the threats. Every whisper Michelle sent through the family network was just another line of evidence. They thought they were burying me. They did not realize they were just providing the shovels. The bank's investigation hit like a structural collapse. I watched from my monitor as the system began to freeze their accounts in real time. This was the immediate blackout I had meticulously prepared for. It was not a slow burn. It was a total systemic failure of the reality they had forged. The heavy glass doors to my high-rise office swung open with a violence that startled my assistant. My family did not look like the polished, gatekeeping figures from the Sunday pot roast anymore. They looked broken. Mark, Michelle, and Mackenzie burst into the room, their frantic energy clashing with the sterile, quiet precision of my workspace. Mackenzie's influencer glow had been replaced by the gray pallor of financial death. Her hair was unkempt, and she was wearing a designer tracksuit that she likely would not be able to pay off. Michelle was clutching a leather bag so tightly her knuckles were white, looking at me with eyes that were wide and terrified. "Ida, you have to stop this immediately," my mother shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "The bank froze everything. We can't even buy groceries. They sent a notice that the mansion is being foreclosed on in 30 days. We have nowhere to go." "Ida, do you hear me? Nowhere." I sat behind my desk, a monolithic barrier of glass and steel. I did not stand up. I did not offer them water or a place to sit. I just watched them with the same clinical detachment I use for a failing data set. "You are destroying us," my father bellowed, though his voice lacked its usual authoritative weight. "We are your parents. Ida, your own blood. You are choosing a credit score over your family. Is a house worth more than your father's life? The stress is killing me." I looked at him, and for the first time, his anger felt like a simulation. "You did not see it as just a house when you used my identity to buy it," I said. My voice was as steady as a heart monitor. "You saw it as a life-sized accessory for Mackenzie's vanity. You did not ask if my life was worth more than her brand. You did not ask if my grandmother's legacy was worth more than a marble foyer." "We thought you would understand," Michelle cried, reaching across the desk. "You were always the strong one, the one who could handle anything. We just thought you would catch us like you always do." "That was your first error," I replied. "You mistook my dependability for a lack of boundaries. You assumed that because I did not make a scene, I did not have a spine. You viewed my future as a family resource you could liquidate whenever Mackenzie had another bad idea." Mackenzie stepped forward, her face twisted in desperation. "Ida, please. If the house goes, my career is over. I will have nothing. You can fix this. Just tell the bank it was a misunderstanding. Tell the police you made a mistake." I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I did not throw it. I did not slam it. I slid it across the polished surface with the precision of a professional. "You wanted me to act like family," I said, my words like cold knives, wrapped in velvet. "So I did. I am acting like the only person in this room who actually values our name. This is a copy of the police report for identity theft and the misappropriation of Grandma Eleanor's trust fund. The bank has already verified the signature mismatch. The criminal investigation is official." Mark's face went pale, the red flush of anger draining into a sickly white. He looked at the documents as if they were a death warrant. "I am protecting my name," I continued. "It is the only thing I have left of myself that you have not tried to forge or steal. You wanted me to be the net. But you forgot one thing about the ground. It does not move just because you are falling." Michelle collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. Mark just stared at me, finally seeing the daughter he had spent 28 years ignoring. I did not feel a surge of joy. I did not feel the need to gloat. I felt only the heavy, a quiet finality of a balance sheet that had finally been zeroed out. "I think you should leave now," I said. "I have a presentation to finish. And you have a lot of packing to do." They filed out of my office in a daze, the sound of the glass door clicking shut being the most powerful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a prison cell unlocking. I turned back to my monitor and watched the mountains in the distance. The storm was over, and for the first time in my life, I was the one standing in the light. The 30 days passed without a single apology. Only a series of frantic, demanding messages that I eventually blocked. I did not watch them pack their bags, but I reviewed the final audit reports of the liquidation. The gated estate was sold at auction, and Mark and Michelle were forced to move into a cramped 2-bedroom rental on the far outskirts of the city. Mackenzie's influencer empire vanished as quickly as her credit score. It turns out that when your luxury backdrop is revealed to be a crime scene of identity theft, your followers leave even faster than the high-end furniture. The court-ordered restitution of $1,250,000 hit my account yesterday. But as I looked at the confirmation on my screen, I realized the figures did not move me the way they once would have. The money was just data. What truly mattered was the shift in purpose. This is what I call the justice of the sower. Most people think of revenge as a mirror, a way to reflect the pain back at the source. They focus on the punishment and the collapse of the past. But real justice is about building a future where the villains no longer have a place to exist in your narrative. By founding the Eleanor Legacy Clinic, I was not just erasing the debt my parents had pinned on me, I was ensuring their cycle of exploitation ended with me. I used the restitution to fund a legal aid center dedicated to victims of family financial abuse. We help the responsible ones, the children and siblings who have been treated like invisible resources for decades. We give them the forensic tools and the legal spine to say no before their futures are signed away in a marble foyer. My grandmother's legacy is finally doing the work she intended. It is no longer a down payment on Mackenzie's vanity. It is the seed for 1,000 new beginnings. I stood in the lobby of the new clinic today. The walls are made of floor-to-ceiling glass, reflecting the same clarity I built in my own career. I watched a young woman walk in, her hands trembling as she held a stack of credit card bills her mother had opened in her name. I saw that familiar look of betrayal in her eyes, the same one I carried on that ordinary Wednesday afternoon. But here, she found a team ready to help her reclaim her name. I still receive emails sometimes. Michelle tries to send messages from new accounts, talking about unconditional love and how families should always forgive. I delete them without reading. In my world, love is not a license to steal, and family is not a subscription where one person pays while the others profit. I do not feel anger when I see their names. I do not feel the need to gloat about their small rental or their fallen reputations. I feel only the quiet, heavy stillness of a life that is finally, beautifully my own. I opened my old tracking spreadsheet one last time. I stared at the line item labeled, "The Audit." Every forgery and every lie was quantified there. I took a slow breath, felt the cool Denver air through the window, and hit delete. The file vanished. My past as a family utility was gone. I have learned that walking away is not an act of cowardice, it is an act of sovereignty. If you believe that walking away is sometimes the loudest thing you can say, share this video. Let's build a community where the responsible ones are finally seen and heard. Drop a comment and tell me what seed you are planting for your own future today.